thedailymass.com. Experience the Roman Catholic Mass from historic St. Louis Cathedral every day on thedailymass.com. His love, anywhere in the world.
New Orleans Catholic cemeteries are first charged with the corporal work of mercy of burying the dead and safeguarding the sanctity and history of some of the city's most historic cemeteries. In many ways, they exist to minister to the living.
Tonight we're visiting St. Louis Cemetery No. 3 in New Orleans just in time for All Saints and All Souls Day to learn more about the Catholic Cemetery's ministries beyond the graves, right here on Issues of Faith.
Once again, we're here at St. Louis Cemetery No. 3 on Esplanade in New Orleans. I'm joined by the director of New Orleans Catholic Cemeteries, Sherry Peppo. Thank you so much for being with us.
Thank you, Sarah.
Well, we talked a little bit earlier in the year about some of the initiatives that the cemeteries are on. As we are approaching All Saints Day and All Souls Day, they're very busy days for you all. Tell us a little bit about the mission and ministry of the New Orleans Catholic Cemeteries.
Yes, Sarah. We've been working really hard to get the word out that we have available property, for our families. We have a new mausoleum here in St. Louis No. 3 that was just completed, St. Teresa Mausoleum. We have a new columbarium in the front of the cemetery by the fountain, Serenity Garden. We've done a lot of landscaping over at St. Patrick No. 3. We're looking to do another project over at St. Patrick No. 3 as well. And but with All Saints Day coming up, we're focused more now on the ministry of our prayers and praying for our deceased and getting ready for All Saints Day.
Sure, and as we've talked about, there's a new cemeteries newsletter coming out very, very soon.
Yes.
But and that first priority is to bury the dead.
Yes.
But there is outreach to the families that have loved ones buried here. And
Definitely.
Again, like you mentioned, that ministry of prayer. Tell us about how some of those initiatives are going.
Yeah, so we had our first Memorial Day Mass in the cemetery to honor our military, to reach out to our families and let them know that they can still come back and be a part of events that we have in the cemetery. So we're hoping to continue that on. We've done some work with Save Our Cemeteries to help seal up some vandalized vaults that was in the Valance Street Cemetery. And we're reaching out to the families to let them know. We have a Facebook page now.
Mm-hmm.
So we'll be posting not only events going on in the cemetery, but history on our cemeteries. So it's very important that we keep the history of our Catholic cemeteries in the limelight. Let people know,
Sure.
our St. Louis No. 1 dates back to 1789. So, we have a lot of work going on with restoration, and we want to let the families know that. So our first newsletter will be coming out at the end of this month.
And so many people think of the cemeteries as tourist attractions. They're very recognizable New Orleans cemeteries. Some people didn't realize they were Catholic. Some people didn't realize there was space available. Many don't realize that our most historic, St. Louis No. 1, 2, are still active cemeteries. Tell us a little bit about that.
They are. Though St. Louis No. 1 does not have as many burials as the rest of our cemeteries, it is still an active cemetery. There's actually a burial there today. And so we have to try to coordinate with still providing for our families and having it be such a large tourist attraction. In the last 7 months, we've had 100,000 visitors to the cemetery.
That's
yeah,
just
so
in St. Louis No. 1?
Just in St. Louis No. 1,
Amazing.
where most of the walking tours are. So, so yes, it's quite busy over there.
And going back to some of the outreach to families, you and your office have done a lot of work to help families prepare. Obviously, you're there for them at the burial and the funeral, but new family planning guides. What's been sort of that reaction?
Yes, it's been very good. We're getting the news out with the flyers that went out to the churches. We have a new sales manager, so we have the pre-planning packets that we will mail out to families, or they can set an appointment and come in and see us. We have the new family records guide, which is very nice. You can keep all your information in one place. Make sure, go over the list, make sure that you've had those plans for not only taking care of your funeral, but where you plan on being interred, and what family members, what legal members, in the community that you need to let know where all your documents are, so we have that.
And those are some of the hard conversations when a family reaches an end-of-life situation. Oftentimes the family member is not in a position to discuss that, or there is the issue of who wants to have those conversations at that time. So being able to sit down and kind of not only go over your records, but share some stories.
Yes. That's been a big movement as well in the whole funeral cemetery industry, is to have that talk and get all the stories and know about what's your family. I can't tell you how many times people have called and they're not even sure where their parents bought a mausoleum crypt for. So there's ways to go about talking about it before it gets to that point, and people, families like sharing those stories, so they can talk about it.
Right, and it would be much easier, I'm sure, to know in advance, where your family is, than to be faced with planning the funeral and have to figure all that out. And your office has been so open in talking to families and reaching out to families. I'm sure that's very much appreciated, especially in a city like New Orleans where family is so important. Yeah,
definitely. Because you can look around and see most of these graves are reused, but in addition to that, like I said, we do have the new property. So if a family decides, a new branch of family wants to go off and be buried if a grave is full or they don't want to continue using it, we can provide for that as well.
And obviously, we're focused on ministry as the Catholic Church. You mentioned the new properties. You also mentioned a new sales manager who is fluent in Spanish.
Yes, he is. And that has already come in very well with communicating with families. So on our website, we've included that information so that families know what phone number they can call to reach our sales manager. And he's already been able to communicate with families that way.
Which is so huge in New Orleans as we're seeing the Latino population grow. It's a nice service to be able to offer.
Yes, we definitely want to be able to reach out that way.
Well, on the onset of our conversation, we talked about us getting closer to All Saints Day, and we have a lot of special events in all of our Catholic cemeteries for that holy day. So tell us a little bit about what will be going on.
Archbishop Amon is going to be presiding over our dedicated All Saints Day Mass at Our Lady of the Holy Rosary Catholic Church on Esplanade at 9 a.m. on November 1st. The blessing of the graves will follow in St. Louis number 3. And then all of our Catholic cemeteries will be having blessing of the graves taking place.
And we will have that in a full screen graphic here for all of our viewers, but we will also have that available online on your website.
Yes. The information's on our website, as well as it'll be published in the Clarion Herald.
Very good. Well, Sherry, I want to thank you for all the work you've done with our New Orleans Catholic cemeteries. And as I mentioned to you as we sat down, it's beautiful and serene in here.
Yes,
it's a little warm for October, but and a little bright. But we want to invite the community to come out and observe All Saints Day here at St. Louis number 3. Join us for Mass or at any of the other Catholic cemeteries.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
And we'll be right back with more Issues in Faith.
Why choose Catholic schools?
Our children have made a wonderful group of friends. There's a great deal of fellowship. They're fitting in beautifully. We could not have asked for a smoother and better transition.
It's more like a family than a regular school system to me. That's what I have witnessed in my last 4 years, and that's the part I love about it the most.
Get the facts at whycatholicschools.org.
And I'm joined here with Mandy Walker, the Executive Director of Save Our Cemeteries. Mandy, what is Save Our Cemeteries?
We are a small nonprofit local organization. We were founded in 1974. Our mission is to preserve, promote, and protect the historic cemeteries of New Orleans.
What was the big impetus for it starting in '74?
Well, there was really no one doing this type of work. So our founder, Mary Louise Kristovich, actually the Archdiocese thought about maybe demolishing some of the wall vaults in St. Louis too, and they eventually worked together to restore them. So that's how we began.
And so tell us about, there's a partnership going on, right? Tell us about that.
Yeah, we have a Tombs by Twilight tour, which is exclusive to Save Our Cemeteries thanks to the Archdiocese. It's the last Saturday of each month, and it's limited to about 50 people. We have tour guides that are going to lead people through the cemetery. It's absolutely beautiful at that time of the day. Our office is next door, so it's very special.
How long is the tour?
Our tours are about an hour and a half long.
Yeah. And what would someone kind of hear about on those tours?
Why we bury people the way we do, and there's so many wonderful characters buried in that cemetery. It's the oldest existing cemetery in the city, so they're going to learn a lot. It was we had our first one recently. It was extremely popular. We have one spot left on the one coming up.
Oh, wow.
And the next one.
And so tell us, what makes your tours different than other ones?
Well, Save Our Cemeteries, our tour guides are a lot of retired teachers, doctors, historians, so we pride ourselves on historically accurate tours. We feel that the cemeteries are so interesting that we don't need to make up ghost and vampire stories or any of that. They're just, and they love what they do, and they're so good to us. And a lot of them just volunteer their time. They don't even ask for payment. I mean, they love the cemeteries that much.
Wow, and truth is so much more important and interesting.
Yes.
Thank you very much for protecting that truth.
Yes.
So tell us about some other things that Save Our Cemeteries is involved with.
We have an annual gala. We have a run through history. It's a 5K through Metairie Cemetery.
Oh, wow.
We do 4 lectures per year. We have a summertime cemetery seminar. So we do lots of different things.
So what would someone hear on those lectures and things like that?
Just, we'll get in people to talk about specific characters buried here or architecture. It's a very, varied range of topics.
So how did you get involved with this particular ministry?
I started working for Save Our Cemeteries as a membership coordinator in 2008, and it's such an interesting job. I have not left, and I eventually became director, so I love the organization.
So what are some highlights, though? I mean, it's a nice time that you've been working with Save Our Cemeteries.
One of my favorite moments was when I showed, there was a couple and their son walking through St. Louis too, and he was 8 and he was really into pirates, and they were just wandering around looking for Dominique Hugh, and I said, I know exactly where that tomb is, and he took his picture with me. They were so happy.
Yeah.
It was really something special, so that sticks out.
So tell us more about the things that are, I guess, the daily operations, the focus that y'all are involved with Save Our Cemeteries.
Our focus is mainly abandoned tombs. We try to work on the tombs that families have died out, moved on, abandoned, no burials for at least 50 or more years. And our latest project has been emergency tomb closures in the city cemeteries. There's been a lot of vandalism, as you know.
Tell us more about the vandalism that's been going on.
Well, the tombs are closed by soft Louisiana brick. It's pretty easy to break into a tomb, and we've even had people on tours stick their phone inside of an open tomb to take pictures of the remains, which is extremely disturbing to us. So we're trying to combat that right now.
Absolutely. So. What is some of the I guess, financial, you talk about the tours by twilight, and there's something at dusk, is that correct too? Like the proceeds, what are some of the financial concerns, needs that y'all are pressing at this time?
We do have a membership base. We also get grants, but our tour program really drives our restoration program. Most of the money we do restoration with comes from the tours, and most in St. Louis Cemetery No. 1 because it's the most popular.
We're coming up close on the Year of Mercy in the church, right? And one of the corporal works of mercy is burying the dead. And I think it's such an amazing ministry, not only, for people just to do that, but at the same time, the ministry involved with helping to preserve and maintain and show reverence and respect towards that. How does that particular ministry, how does that reach you?
Well, I mean, I love the architecture,
Yeah.
of course, first and foremost, but the people inside of these tombs built this city, and
That's
you know,
right.
I think we should pay respect to them. We owe it to them.
You know, I think we get so caught up in our culture about just advancing forward. We forget about our past, and
Right.
this definitely reminds us of you know, one, where we're ultimately headed, and appreciate the gift that we have now, but also too, like you're saying, to appreciate the great people who've gone before us.
Absolutely.
Who are some of the people that stand out for you that are buried in these cemeteries that you always like to kind of say, hey, look, you know who's buried here?
I'm a bit fascinated by Paul Morphy, the chess champion.
Is that
'cause
right?
He was. I don't know. I'm fascinated
Yeah.
by him. He sticks out in my mind first and foremost.
Yeah. Well, tell us more about the exact restoration. What does that involve?
Of course, it depends on the project and the tomb. It could be something minor from crack repair to lime washing to we stabilized the wall vaults of Lafayette Cemetery No. 1 back in 2008. So we've done some major projects. So it really does depend on the specific tomb.
So what kind of price does that sound like? I mean, it sounds something that maybe put a little, you know,
That was a
something on
huge
it.
grant from
yeah.
the National Trust and American Express, and yeah, it's very expensive. And we were only able to do one section of the wall with that. money.
Who is able to go out and obtain those grants for y'all? Is that something that y'all specifically?
That's all we do. We do that internally. Yeah, we
Wow,
just apply.
that is not an easy task.
No.
Much less picking
But
up.
we're special, and we
Absolutely.
actually got the money for that.
So some more details on the exact. What does that look like? So and normally, how old is a tomb when you have to go and really start like repairing it?
Well, all of these tombs, for the most part, are old. It's maintenance. If you go out on All Saints Day and you lime wash your family tomb, you're doing a lot. You're keeping that structure intact for a long time. So it's maintenance, I think.
Yeah.
And they fall apart because there's no one.
Does the
to take care of
washing
them.
cause any problem with the integrity of the tomb itself?
No, it's actually better. A lot of people will paint their tombs with latex paint.
Uh-huh.
That is not appropriate for some of the older structures.
Sure.
You actually have to go out there and lime wash, which was a
Yeah.
tradition on All Saints Day in the 1800s especially.
So speaking about the partnership with the Archdiocese, how did that start and kind of why did that start?
The director, Sherry Peppo of the cemeteries, said, "Hey, Mandy, what do you think about doing some dust tours?" I said, "Oh, that's excellent. Can it just be us?" And she
Right.
said, "Well, let me think on it." And she said, "You're the only ones doing work in our cemeteries, and yes, it's just for you." And so we're really, really flattered, honored to.
And how long has that partnership been going on?
Well, we've been involved with the Archdiocese from the get-go,
Right.
but Sherry and I have a great relationship, and we kind of, picked each other's brains and came up with this tour, and all the money's going to go back into the cemeteries, and we're really happy to do that.
So what are some other fruits that you've seen with that kind of relationship that y'all had together?
Well, just that open line of communication.
Yeah.
She and I obviously are cemetery directors, and we both
Sure.
care very much, and we always exchange ideas, and I think we have the same goal.
Yeah, awesome. Thankful for your opportunity to be here on the show, but thank you for all the work that you're doing. And again, it is an amazing ministry and something that I hope more people are aware of and help out, because I think all the things that you're doing and taking care of these wonderful places, these cemeteries, these tombs, to preserve and respect the dignity of our culture and our history. So
Wonderful.
thank you very much, Mandy, for your work, and
you.
and God bless you.
God bless.
And we'll be right back.
The staff at Notre Dame Hospice, they're just loving people. They're wonderful with my dad, and they are my backup. They've taken a burden off my shoulders. I just feel like they'll be there for me at a time when I really need them. And I think they've learned to think of my dad as part of the family because he's been there so long.
It's your choice. Ask for Notre Dame Hospice.
I know they'll be there for me when I need them, and I'm very, very pleased with them, and I think it's a blessing.
As we've said before on tonight's program, our cemeteries are some of our most historic treasures in the city of New Orleans. And joining us now to talk a little bit more about the history of Catholic cemeteries and the tradition of All Saints Day is Archdiocesan Archivist Dr. Emily Gagne Loomis. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you.
Well, I was intrigued a little earlier this year when the results of an archaeological dig came out, and conversations were happening about the St. Peter Street Cemetery, which does not always exist, but shows that the Catholic Church has truly been a part of the city for 300 years.
It has been. In fact, the St. Peter's Cemetery was the first cemetery in the city. And we think about the city and the French Quarter being so small today, but at that time, in the early beginnings of the city, you know, the city is 1718 when it begins, so the cemetery was on the outskirts of the city, which was on Burgundy Street, because Dauphine Street was where the city actually ended.
Wow.
There was a moat, can you imagine, a moat around the city to protect the city, and the cemetery was on the outside. So today we know that as St. Peter Street and Burgundy Street, and that's where that cemetery was originally.
It's amazing. And so as the city grew, the cemeteries grew, St. Louis number 1, 2, 3, I'm fascinated constantly how you can watch the growth of the city by the location of the cemeteries.
You can see exactly how, it's almost, you know, it's circles, and cities grow in circles. So you can always draw, we have the river that kind of cuts up our circle a little bit. But you can look at the bands, and you can look at the way people were and where the outskirts, exactly what you said, are of the city. Of course, in St. Louis number 3, you know, 1850s, that's the next growth pattern. And we are growing here in the city of the dead because of the yellow fever epidemics.
That's right, that's right. So again, the Catholic Church has been part of this. It was law that people be buried within a Catholic cemetery on sacred ground. It's changed a little bit as we move forward, but tell us a little bit about the history of New Orleans cemeteries and what makes them so unique.
Well, you know, New Orleans cemeteries, and I didn't really know. I mean, growing up in New Orleans, we always knew that we were buried above ground and that we were so unique, and that's what, you know, what our monuments look like, etc. So our cities of the dead look quite different than anywhere else in the United States. But as I've traveled overseas and I started going to cemeteries in Italy or France or Spain, they have cemeteries that look like this. So in reading about the history of cemeteries and in learning about what happened and what was going on in other areas led me to some of the discoveries. So what you see is the monuments are above ground, and in Europe the monuments are above ground, but the bodies are below ground, and that's the difference. So it isn't until we here have to figure out how to deal with our water table that the bodies start going in the monuments rather than below the monuments. So once you know that distinction, it becomes something of a historic little piece of fact that yes, we look very much like European cemeteries. We have some of the same architects. If you're ever in Paris and you're at the Père Lachaise Cemetery, it's a park-like setting. It's for where people went and visited and spent time with their loved ones, had picnics, had services. They spent the day in the park. You know,
Wow.
it was let's go to the park. But the parks were these beautiful, beautiful locations where all these monuments were and statues, etc.
Much like ours are today, very
Exactly like it,
park-like, very serene, very green. And as we are coming up again on All Saints' Day, a lot of the traditions of families visiting tombs will be highlighted and take a lot more significance within the community. Can you tell us a little bit about the All Saints' Day traditions?
Well, All Saints' Day traditions, that's when you clean up. You know, it's like the yearly, and we don't have spring cleaning in our graveyards, we have All Saints' Day cleaning. So you'll see people coming in and whitewashing tombs, especially in some of our rural areas. It's a way to go and make sure the grass is cut. Not that you don't do that on a consistent basis anyway, but there's just, it's All Saints' Day and All Souls' Day, and that's the day that you go and you be with, you know, your loved ones, and you take care of their sacred ground where they were buried.
And for those who might be visiting for the first time, obviously, Sherry mentioned we've had over 100,000 tourists in St. Louis number 1 since the beginning of the year. What would a visitor who might not be as accustomed to this see?
You know,
or
a
expect?
visitor's going to walk in and go, wow, look at all these graves that are above ground. This is really either silly or why are they doing this and why do they commemorate people like this. So they're going to see that. They're going to see a lot of people in the cemeteries visiting. They'll see a lot of flowers because, you know, that's always the day that we lay quite a bit of flowers out. So they're just going to see people. It's just a time to go. And, you know, as a child and even as an adult, my family has done the same thing. It's just a tradition. It's to go and to see, and it's to connect with your ancestors. And for us, it's a way to know how that Catholic faith's been passed down as well, because it's that connection with our Catholic ancestors that went before us. And you know, our tombs, everybody's in them. So it's not like just, you're not visiting a bunch of graves. You go to one and you just read the history, sometimes 200 years of, you know, lots of people being in those grave sites.
That's right. And we talked a little bit about the masses and the blessings that will go on. You, as an archivist, as a family that's been here in New Orleans for many times, you have some interesting familial anecdotes about walking through some of the cemeteries. Are you comfortable sharing?
Sure. I mean, I have gone through a lot of cemeteries. I find things. I look for historical, you know, little tidbits of family. One of the more unique kind of personal things that happened to me here in this cemetery, I was pregnant for my second son and had a very good friend who had died of cancer. And I was sitting waiting for my mother because, you know, you're pregnant and you're hot. And I sat somewhere and didn't know where I was sitting, just sat on a step, and my mom came to get me and I was crying. And she said, "What's wrong?" And I had actually sat down on his step. It's the Joubert tomb, and it says David Frank Joubert, and I sat there and had no idea I had sat on David. You know, it was just a unique experience. But you walk through and you find you're connecting people, and you're connecting babies that have died with your family that maybe you didn't know about, and you're just connecting family, and the whole history of the city is right here in our cemeteries.
That's right. The most notable New Orleanians are buried either in the cathedral or in St. Louis number 1, number 2.
St. Louis number 2 has all your jazz greats. You know, the other thing you're going to find in here is if you're interested, which we all are, in the benevolent societies and of the sisters and the priests that have nourished us in our faith. When I was driving through here, the sisters, the Sisters of the Poor are here. Nice. And so you just get a feeling of, you know, there's actually love here in the cemetery.
That's right. They're not a place to be afraid of. They're a place to come and celebrate our rich Catholic history and tradition.
They are.
Well, thank you so much, Lee, for being with us as always and for sharing both your personal and your professional information about our Catholic cemeteries.
Sure. Thank you.
And we'll be right back.
The heart of Woman's New Life Center is its outreach to women in unplanned pregnancies, especially those who are seeking an abortion. Our professional counseling services, combined with free ultrasound tests, provide each woman with the nurturing she needs, while also revealing her unborn child to her. For more information about the life-saving work of Woman's New Life Center, call 504-831-3117 or visit womansnewlife.com.
To learn more about New Orleans Catholic cemeteries, visit them online at nolacatholiccemeteries.org or find them on Facebook.
And that's it for this episode of Issues in Faith. Hope you join us again soon. Until then, God bless.